So we were discussing about these three models, right, which evolved over the time period. First, the US model, which is we call the Silicon Valley model, and the European Union model, which is called, it's not very popular, but in some policy circles, it's very popular, the regulatory model, because they try to regulate most of the technologies which actually come from outside or originate outside of European Union or within European Union. So because this is a new technologies, these new technologies are data driven. So the data driven technologies have some challenges when it comes to the privacy and rights of users, and even some kind of discriminatory implications they have on when they are deployed online, right? So because of that, the European Union has taken a firm stance to basically to formulate different regulations, and the Chinese model is basically a model where they started with without any regulation in early 2000s or late 90s. Then when they saw what's coming, especially as I said, the European Union has started regulating because of the harms the digital platforms can have on the users. So similarly, China also saw very recently, right? So they have started regulating the digital space or data-driven, technologies only since 2 3 years. It started, I think, in 2017. They started seriously. They considered, regulating. Then there's a huge debate among scholars, among policymakers and regulators. So what to do and how to regulate and how to view this, because data is at the center of digital economy, and it can create value, which is which can give more commercial edge to any of the nation, and by doing so, it's also kind of gives a competitive edge, right? So because innovation is all about, to increase the competitiveness. That's how innovation is framed from the policy perspective, right? So when you talk about the national policies, so the national policy, innovation policies always, see innovation as a competitive tool for competitiveness, increased competitiveness. So that's how China has seen, data as a competitive data as a tool to enhance competitiveness and innovation both. And by doing so, they wanted to maximize growth and more employment opportunities, more high value or high paid jobs, and overall economic growth. So that's how Chinese started seeing data. And then, but the thing is, they always wanted to balance the how to balance this the economic outcomes, which are weigh very heavily, and the harms they can have, the digital technologies and the platforms can have on users and the citizens. So they wanted to balance this. So they have started, they also started regulating this space. But the both regulation and the non-regulating, right? So because I think we also discussed this, the public policy does not mean only you when you act. Public policy also is, when you don't act also, it's also called public policy, because that's also a decisive act, right? So whether to act or not to act. So what Chinese have done is they have not acted, they have let the whole industry, the digital platform economy and the digital industry to flourish, to flourish, so that they can maximize the number of the companies and user base, and more people can get benefited from the platform economy. So they didn't think seriously about regulating it for almost 20 years. Then they have understood the harms, and it is also rooted in the political system of China, right? So if you see Xi Jinping, who is a Communist Party chairman, and then Chinese president, right? So um, he saw, it's not that he alone saw it, but overall, there is a understanding in the policy circles in Beijing, to to narrow down the inequalities, right? So because platform technologies or platform economy can create inequalities in a bigger way than what we already have. They have potential of that. It's not that they do it just because they are technology and they do it, but what happens is the kind of windfall gains, which is like profits, right? So the capital gains, what people, the entrepreneurs can get out of these platform businesses, is much more than what you can get in the traditional or conventional old economy businesses. That is because of, this is because of the Silicon Valley business model, right? The data driven model is basically, the more and more people come onto the platforms, so the more investments they garner, right? They gain more investments from the venture capital firms. So this investments again reinvested, some part of it is reinvested to strengthen their platforms, to expand their markets, to get more users. But at the same time, they also kind of accumulate this wealth. So this wealth accumulation is creating huge inequalities in the society. So that is what Chinese government has seen, witnessed this inequality growing. And platforms are one of the reasons, the platform economy is one of the reasons for this. That's what they have identified, right? So once they identify, what they have done is they have started regulating them. They have started putting more restrictions on them. And they have also they have kind of with a very firm hand, right? So if you see the Alibaba's Ant Financial is a big, financial services company, which is an online financial, mobile and online financial services company, which is fintech company, right? We call it fintech company. So this financial technology company called Ant Financials, they have reached such a stage where Chinese citizen life cannot be imagined without the 2-3 platforms. Like one of them is basically Ant Financials, and second is Ping An. This is another insurance company, and similarly which is a lending platform. And there is another company called Tencent. So these they have created a market for themselves which is so expansive and so dominant. So they have started abusing their market power. See, having market dominance is one thing, but abusing the market dominance just because you don't have a firm competition, so you take measures which harms your own customer. But customers don't have power to fight it because there is no law to fight it, right? So these things put policymakers in a tight spot, right? So because policymakers at the end of the day have to make policies for the welfare of people, because because they have to provide stability, right? Political stability, social stability in the society. So that is their work, right? And they have to see that the distribution of resources, power have to be has to be done in a very equitable manner, right? So at least, so Chinese have seen this. The Chinese government especially has seen this, and they have started regulating it. So So both China's inaction of regulating, in the sense not regulating the platforms, and later when they saw the problems, then they started regulating it. So both are part of the policy, framework. So that is why both are actually coming from the state, not from from somewhere else, right? So it doesn't come from an independent regulatory body. It actually stems from the Chinese state. Basically, Chinese state understands this. Then they have, they first thought the economic benefits are huge, so we have to reap these economic benefits in order to make China a competitive market in the global economy, and a strategic player by having this market player and the strong economic player. But that has started harming their own population, their own citizens. Then they have started to, the Chinese government has started to regulate it. So which means actually both are emanated from the Chinese government. So that's why we call this as a Chinese state model. But in European Union, on the other hand, so it is not the government which actually started thinking about it. It is basically independent regulators, right? So there is certain level of independence to the regulatory arms of the government. Like, it's also part of the state, but it is not government, right? The government is basically a political party, because in EU, most of the countries are they're all democratically elected, and the EU itself has democratically elected representatives. So what they do is they only sense the things when there is a public mood, right? The public opinion changes. When they see that, and there is a active a resistance for something, or active demand for something, then the politicians and the policymakers act upon it. Otherwise, are they act when there is an independent body, or there is a law or judiciary, again another independent arm of the state. And similarly, there's a media coverage and academia which actually gives the insight into what's happening with the platform economy. So then the public opinion will be will get into a more consultative process, so which is basically a democratic process. But in China, it's not possible, right? So there is no such engagement where there's such a process where government and the citizens can have a kind of a consultative process, right? So the consultative process happens between the party and the that is Communist Party. When I say party, because it's a single party system. So the Communist Party and the citizens. So when Communist Party understands this, there is inequality which may get out of hand, and it can even threaten the stability of the political system, social harmony, and at the same time the state itself, the stability of the state itself. So then if they see those signs, then the state will act, right? The state gives certain kinds of direction to regulators, whether to regulate or not. Then the legislations are passed, and regulatory actions are taken. So that's how the Chinese model evolved. So, but in all these three models, at the heart of this, right, the heart of the problem is basically the data-driven economy, because data at the center of this problem, right? Because data is seen as an economic resource now. So if you see most of the we also discussed this, right? So in our previous classes, so the most of the media outlets and academia, so most of the popular narratives around data is always, data is new oil, data is new natural resource. So that is because we saw that also. It's like how data can be used for insight. Basically, the businesses can use data from its users, basically the customers and the consumers, and then make insight, and those insights in turn will give them a kind of a decision making power, right? So to the all the actors who are involved in data economy, especially the businesses, right, digital businesses. So they capture the data, and then they use that data, they analyze the data, and they build insights, and by building insights they make decisions. So these decisions sometimes even automated, right? So because you have algorithm which actually predicts what's going to happen, based on the data. So what kind of customers are going to buy what kind of products, or what kind of customer behavior, you foresee, in the next few months or few years. So based on that, you make products, you tweak your strategies, and you make your business models more aligned to these preferences of customers. That's one thing. And second is, you also can make digital marketing campaigns by exploiting the data, and then you can manipulate the behavior of customer itself based on the data what you have, and you can mold the consumer behavior. So that it's like they can even more they spend their time on your platforms, they buy from your platforms. So this all can happen on the platform, on the platform, on the digital platforms. So with this, the the main challenges for any policymaker, one is how to protect the rights of the users, consumers. So who are coming to the platform, and they are either using them as a media, consuming the content, or they are buying buying a number of products and services and content, whatever it's possible, right? So this consumption, data consumption and data production, right? So the both happens on online platform, because most of the content is user driven content, in the sense we as users, we create the data, right? So for them to understand us. So which means actually they are not really putting a lot of effort, except except developing technology, right? The technology, the applications, basically. So once they deploy the application, they have the major chunk of the data what they want for their business strategies, for maximizing revenues and profits and whatnot. So this can create certain challenges, like data privacy is one, and second is there are also lots of studies which talk about the platform, the hate speech, right? So the negative campaigns, hate speech on the platform. But that's again, we have to take these things as contextual, right? So they are not they origin in one place, it's not the same across the globe, but there are certain fundamental challenges, like let's say building like false news, or the fake news, right? The fake news generated by users for political ends, or for any to build certain kind of narratives, and which actually ultimately threaten the stability of both the businesses and then the society. So this is one side of it. The other side of it, the data, when you get control more and more data, you when I say the platforms, right? The digital platforms gain access to more data, capture the data, and control that data as if it's their resource, right? It is in a way, it is not their resource. It is basically data is basically owned by the people who basically go to the platform. They give the data, they create that content. So this content is beneficial to the platform, but it is also can be beneficial to the consumer if the both the one who creates the data, in the sense the consumer, and the ones who control the data, who captures this from their platforms, they both work together with the help of policy makers or governments. So then it can create even better value for both of them, in the sense there can be a measure of a kind of trust between both these actors, right, the consumers and the platforms. So if you have this kind of engagement, then your businesses also are not come under pressure, especially the risks like regulatory pressure or social pressures itself, or political pressure. So this is one side of the another side of the story. There is one more to it, right? So the trust is the first is the privacy, where it's a fundamental right, so it has to be protected. And second is the trust issues between the consumers and the users and the platforms. And the third is competition, right? So the data can give so much power to these platforms once they gain control over this large chunks of the big data available across their platform. So what they can do is they can become not only bigger platforms, but they also become very powerful. Like we see now that's what is happening with Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Amazon. So you name any of these platforms, they control the data. By controlling data, they basically they can more and more they use this insight to gain resources again, in the sense the capital, like the financial resources they gain business, the more business from different geographies, different channels. So this power they can abuse by not sharing the data, or by not by pushing the competitors away. Because in classical competition economics, so it's basically the competition is in the consumer's interest, right? Because the more and more players are there in the market, in the similar segment of products and services, then you serve the customer better. So that is a very very commonsensical, and at the same time we would have studied in our economics and in business classes, if you have studied business. So the competition creates both the consumer, it can create a strong consumer interest, it can work for consumer interest. So competition is, in a way, it's a good thing, right? So now, with the power, they can manipulate the data, and they can put the smaller players who are entering the data businesses, they can create disadvantages for them. One example we could see, Google, Google's examples we would take, because Google was one of those first players who were fined actually in European Union for their anti-competitive behavior, right? So what Google did is, basically Google has a search engine. So the search engine collects all the data what we all search, right? So when we search, we actually give the words, right? Keywords. We put keywords and then we search. At the same time, we also we upload to the internet. We kind of because we, in the sense, the businesses, the media, content, user generated content, what kind of, all kinds of data. That data is now on the internet. So what Google developed is the algorithm, search algorithm, which is called, we call it search engine. So this powerful algorithm can crawl the web, right? So they are basically crawling, which is called web crawling, and then it gives you the result what you want on the on online space. That is the search engine function, basically. So when you more and more people search for the similar things, so it actually categorizes all these search content on one classification, right? So that it's like, it gets sharpened in the sense, the search engine gets more intelligent, right? The more sharp, to give what we are looking for, because of the it trains, right? So because it does keep on doing the same thing and again and again and again. So when you repeat the same act, so you do it better. So that's how we also do as a humans, because our intelligence permits that. Similarly, artificial intelligence, which is basically a machine learning program, so that also, the algorithm basically, that also do the same thing when it is fed the data, right? So when you feed the data to the artificial intelligence algorithms, so they train on this data, and they become sharper, and they give the desired results what we want. So the Google actually does the same thing. So when Google does it, so what Google does is, Google actually gives, to certain kind of content, it pushes up. Certain kind of content, it pushes down. In the sense, you will find the certain kinds of content in the top page, right? And first page, second, third, fourth. But beyond fourth, you may not go there, because that's the human behavior. So our behaviors are, certain, we have certain kinds of traits. So this actually is captured, analyzed by the algorithm itself, right? So the Google algorithm knows this. So by knowing this, what it does is, it actually gives where it is getting paid, one. And second is, it also pushes the competitor content down the pages after 4 or 5 pages down the line. So which means, actually, it is actually creating some kind of a disadvantage by having this market power, because Google has a dominant market share in this space, right? So in search engine space, Google captured almost 90% of market share. The other players are Yahoo, Bing, and what, and maybe AOL or something, very small players, or maybe Yandex of Russia, or some Chinese players who actually have like Baidu. Baidu has its own search engine, and then it's restricted, right? So it's only in China, it's popular in China, and they don't have Google, so they basically rely on Baidu. So apart from that, the most of the countries and the most of the globe relies on Google to search. Similarly, the companies also use Google as a means to get traction from the consumers, from the customers, so that it's like they can sell their products, so that their market, they can also increase their market size. But Google, what it does is, it basically it did, actually, it's not that it does it, so it did that. So the European Union has taken a very serious view of this, because this is anti-competitive, first, because it goes against the law of the competition, because competition law does not allow abusive behavior where based on your market dominance. So Google is resorting to that. So that's why they have taken a view that it is an antitrust. It's called antitrust law, right? So this law actually prevented Google to do this, and it fined heavily, billions of dollars on Google for this kind of a anti-competitive behavior online in search engine space, right? So this, so why we should know this is because this kind of a platform dominance is, it can create certain kinds of abusive characteristics, right, among businesses. So this is a third dimension to the policy challenges. So these are the three major policy challenges when it comes to governing digital space or digital platforms. So I see not many people. So if you have any question, doubt, or if you have missed last session, or if you want to discuss anything, so we will open up now. Then again, we will continue this, this next few slides. So do you have any questions or any comments or any feedback? or you want to recap something from last session. So I'm okay. Yeah, I see two here, Prachi and Subhish. So you both, if you have any questions or anything, we can discuss. And I see Subhish, I think you have just joined, looks like.
Yes, sir. Extremely sorry. I was being gone for workout, so just back
No,
a bit.
no, it's absolutely fine. I'm not saying that you are late because I'm not saying that. I'm asking you if you have any doubt or question from either last class or if you don't understand anything, please go ahead and ask.
Sir, I wasn't there in the last class, but I watched the video, so I
Okay,
had made some notes. Let me go through it. If anything comes up, I'll surely ask, sir.
sure, great.
Thank you, sir.
So yeah,
Excuse me,
and yeah, please,
sir, sorry to interrupt you in between.
no problem. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. Just prior to this, you said about the platform dominance and how Google also create inequalities. On the same light, I wanted to ask a question that how Google Ads can actually create inequalities for the new and small scale enterprises that has just entered the market, the digital market. So if you can just enlighten us on that.
Yes. So that is what I was talking about, right? So you see Google Ads, right? So the first page when you search for any keyword, so what happens is that keyword actually gives certain ads. They certain advertisements appear on the first page. If you see Google, everyday life we use, right? So it's part of now our life, our lives. So when you see the first few ads, they're all actually paid, right? So they pay Google ad fee. Based on that, they appear, where they have to appear, Google will decide it, right? So the where, but after ads, there is also content, and that contents also appear, in the form of non-advertisement form, right? It's basically a normal content which actually either it gives the website of that particular company or particular, what is related to that particular keyword, the specific keyword. And when you go into different pages, the same thing continues, and then maybe the research relevance sometimes is drastically gets weakened, right? So the relevance is not the same, because when you click for, let's say, we search for something like a digital platform, right? So it may, what should it give, right? When it say digital platform, like let's say e-commerce, right? So you say e-commerce, what kind of advertisements it should give first, whether it should give Amazon, or it should give Google Commerce or Google Sale, or it should give something like Flipkart in India's case, or something like Zalando in European Union case. What should it give when you say e-commerce platform? It should give, that is the challenge, right? So what Google pushes in the top, right? Both the ad and the non-ad content, in the sense advertisement content and non-advertisement content, these two, how Google pushes the results on the top, the first page, and similarly second, third, fourth pages, how their algorithm is trained. Because it is not that Google, it is automatically it is happening. It is designed such a way, because every algorithm is written, right? The program is written behind the scene. We don't know, that is different issue. But we think this is all coming, like a magic, but it's not. Somebody is writing programs, somebody is writing algorithm, and it is trained on certain data, right? There's a training data, the algorithm is trained on that data, so that it gets sharpened, and then it gives that desired result and desired outcome or insight. So in Google's case, this is what happened. Like, let's say, if you are looking for phone, right? A smartphone, and then you said, the smartphone, I want some 10,000 rupees to 20,000 rupees, which one I should buy. You write, the budget phone of 10,000, 20,000, and then it should give. It should give the most popular one on the web, which is maybe a Samsung or iPhone, It should give that, or it should give Pixel, which is Google's phone. If it gives Pixel, then that is abusing market dominance, because Pixel's sales are less than Samsung sales or iPhone sales. So if it doesn't give Pixel and it gives Samsung, the based on their sales or based on the content available on the internet about these phones, based on that, or based on the rating, right? So the user rating, but any platform, on any platform, based on rating. So this kind of there should be some basis, right, to give what result should come first, what result should come next. So if that is not, that's not followed, and you see only Pixel first and second is Samsung, and then the whole first page is basically ads of Pixel, and then how Google phone is or Moto G earlier, which has Google had some patents on it. So that is called market dominance. So by doing that, what Google is doing is it is abusing the market dominance what it has on the control over search engine, right? So they have absolute control over the search engine business. So now the customer is exploited because he is not getting the right choices, because at the end of the day capitalism works on the customer choice, right? So it's a free market. What is free market? Free market is nothing but customer has choices, and the competition, in a free market there are many players who compete to get the customer attention, and then they sell the price value what customer can get the best, the best value, what customer thinks he will buy that product. So that is the idea of the a fair free market principle. So if that, because competition law, competition economics works around this framework, right? Works in this framework, which is free market and fair principles, right? So laws are made to uphold these economic principles. So now if you abuse and because you have a dominant you are a dominant player in certain market, and you abuse that power and you restrict certain players, you push them to a different page so that they don't get the attention from the customer, and you push your own products, then obviously Google is at fault. Google is violating the basic principle, basic competition law. So that is the problem with creating this inequality, or it's not inequality actually, it is creating a kind of a market disruption and market abuse. Basically it's an abuse, right? So it is abusing the market power. So based on that, so European Commission has levied huge fines on Google. So that the smaller players can also get a level playing field. So that's the competition, right? So the level playing field is all about the economic principle of this the competition. Yeah. So have I answered your question?
Yeah.
Thank you. And anybody else has any question or any comment here?
Yes, sir. May I?
Yeah, sure.
Yes, sir. So you were mentioning the anti-competitive practice by Google. I think you're particularly mentioning to the case that Google was fined by the European Commission. So I have a little bit deep into further. I want to ask you about the market which holded by Google and Apple. I mean the Play Store and the App Store.
Mm-hmm.
In that case also they have playing this dominance game. But
yes,
still, it may not be always feasible for the government to. I understand that there are many cases are prevailing over them, but still the insufficiency of evidence is a major thing when it comes to this kind of algorithmic collusions and algorithmic decisions. So how you suggesting to tackle this kind of problems? Is there any methods or any kind of, I read somewhere it's like they use cookies and all kind of new age techs to track this decisions and this transactions, but how far it's efficient?
see, the thing is there are practices like algorithmic auditing, right? So the especially when the case is filed against any of the player, when any regulatory body takes the cognizance of it and then want to take this case up and then investigate it, right? The investigation process is that, right? So the first, you see the prima facie evidence, what's happening on the web, and then because you have a certain kind of evidence, because the complainant, right, so who complains, they would have given certain evidence basically, so how this is actually an anti-competitive behavior, or how it is antitrust case, or how it is violating net neutrality principle, so these kind of antitrust issues. So how they are violating, there is a basically a complaint is registered, which means actually there is a certain precedence to it, right? So there is already certain cognizance. So taking that, and then from that, the investigation happens, right? So one is obviously when it is algorithmic, then obviously algorithmic, it is sometimes the complex algorithms, it is very difficult to audit and then see what kind of risk assessment you can do, and then see where what kind of algorithm is creating this, or how they have designed it. It's not easy, right, in all cases, but auditing is possible, right? So they go and then they do the reverse engineering and then see that, and then they call designers who designed this, and then they call the teams. They will ask them to file a report basically, so who has done this, and then why you have done that, if you have created such algorithm, how did you do that, what are the steps. If you see that this particular case, there was whole code is given, report is presented to European Commission, DG, right, Director General of the digital connectivity, right? So the whole evidence is presented, not just only the report, right? So where the qualitative evidence, but there is also code is given. Code is given, what kind of algorithm, what kind of data trained. So if this data trained, then what kind of outcomes they get. So all the scenarios, right? So it's all presented to as an evidence. So this is possible. It is not that it is not possible, but in some cases, if it is algorithm is too complex, and it is a kind of black box, right? So black box artificial intelligence can be a black box process where you cannot really open up every algorithm and then see. Certain algorithms are so complex that you cannot audit them, you cannot do the reengineering. So that possibility is always there, but there are principles which are useful to conduct audits. So you have any doubts on earlier what we have discussed? If you have any doubts, we can because last week, in the sense this week, on Thursday we had an interactive session, right? So some of the participants came and then they asked a lot of questions. So how this whole digital governance, and then some of the questions were about career related, but some of them are actually the classes, about the classes and about the content what we are trying to do here, right? So if you have any other questions, please. Yeah, thank you. So then if you don't have, then we can move ahead. So move forward to the next slides and see that. So this is basically, these are the three models, but the thing is, the models keep evolving, right? This is not set in stone. So European Union is heavily now regulating all technologies, and especially the digital technologies and the data driven businesses. So if they are regulating today, so that doesn't mean that it's like they'll keep doing the same thing and then same regulations continue. Some of the regulations, of course, they are meant to be there for a longer period, like GDPR, right? So which is developed to basically to give certain protections against the data privacy violations from all kinds of actors, not just only. So when I say when we say data privacy, please don't think that it's like this is only created by Google or big tech firms. this actually can be can be created by even governments, right? So the governments have their own way of dealing with citizens, and then collecting the citizens data, users data, and using for unintended purposes, because when you collect data for one purpose, but you don't use them only for that purpose, but you use for other purposes, right? So that's a surveillance tactic, right? So there is a great book, it's called Surveillance Capitalism. So I'm not sure if you guys have heard about it. So please do read. It is available online, but be act with a little caution, because it's not the available copy is not a it's a pirated one, so the copyrights are but you guys can see if you can get somewhere, but do read that. It's an amazing book. It is one of the, I think, the best books available on digital economy, and how digital economy is actually trying to trying to take the data of the human, of all our data, in the sense of the personal data of citizens, and then trade in human futures, right? So it's written by Shoshana Zuboff. Her name is. I will give you, because this. I think I have. I'm not sure if I have forwarded you the articles, but I will forward, because I can't forward the ebook because it's pirated version, so I can't do that. But I have a physical one. But you guys, if you can get from your libraries, please get the physical one and then make copies and then keep it. Or if you get an online one for free, then please go ahead and get it. That's an amazing book. It deals with how digital platforms are creating surveillance capitalism, which is basically they are basically they are conducting surveillance on each user, and with the data they are they are kind of exploiting the data for their future business practices. And similarly, they work with the government, and they also share this data with the government. And it can restrict our own human capacity, right? And our own it can manipulate our own behavior also in many cases. What happened with Cambridge Analytics, right? So with Facebook, when Facebook not Facebook, when elections were happening across different countries, right? So in US and UK, the Cambridge Analytics basically was advising them, right? So with the data analysis, and then trying to understand the behavior of the users of Facebook, right? So what they did is they created algorithms to crawl the across Facebook, and then they kind of developed insight based on the data. Users created data, that is the content which is developed on Facebook. So they manipulated the behavior itself by pushing certain kinds of narrative based on the data created by the users itself, right? So it actually altered the whole political outcomes itself. In Brexit, in the case of Brexit, they have created a narrative that Brexit is a great thing for for UK to come out of European Union. It will it will give more freedom, more autonomy, and more resources, and less migration from Europe, and it can give more financial space for UK. So all these narratives they built. But how they could manipulate their own citizens? By going into their personal data, which they share on Facebook, and they amplify the rhetoric, right? The rhetoric is like, let's say, yes, UK is the strongest, and it's the best economy, but because of Germany, France, and all this, UK is crippled, and they have pushed their laws against UK's interest in EU. So this kind of narrative. So once they see even a smallest, a kind of, slight, um, slight leaning, right? So you lean towards right wing, and little bit, you try to understand. Yes, this is great opinion. So you share sometime. Then you keep seeing only that content, right? So they push that content. Facebook pushes that content, and then Cambridge Analytica, has helped, these the government, the political parties, to basically push this narrative more and more on Facebook, on other platforms, so that it's like these guys really, believe in the content what they are saying, right? They made them believe, and after that, the end result is very easy, right? So predict they all go and then latch up that the narrative, and then they vote for it. So it's like now you understand, right? So they can even push for narratives which are political, and they can alter the political outcomes itself, right? So that's why she calls this as a surveillance capitalism. So this is a very important book. Please do read if you can get the copy of it, right? So yeah. So that is the problem with Silicon Valley model, right? So which can create this surveillance capitalism, right? So that's the problem with this. So it has its own roots in the physical world, right? So you might have read or heard about Panopticon, right? So where Michael Foucault is one of the one of the proponent of this theory. Panopticon is basically where the prison guard, who can sit at the center, who can stand in the center at a high altitude and look around the prisoners, right? So he's at the center, and then the whole prison is actually around him, the prison cells, right? So each cell, so he has a view, 360-degree view, so what they are doing, but they cannot see him because he's on high altitude, which is covered. He can have windows, he can only look at it. So this is called a panopticon, right? So this panopticon is used by even the platforms. That's what she argues. So the governments can do that. So we have seen that in Snowden's case. We will talk about it when we move forward. But you also please read, what are some of the issues, because of this. The social media and other platforms, what they can create, what kind of harms they can create. These are the trust and privacy issues. We also talked about the competition and the economic issues. What happens, when a platform dominates one kind of a market. So now let's see, other things. So there is this, the divide now, right? So we have seen three models, and they dominate, the world today. So one is the Silicon Valley model, which is the preeminent one, and that's where the whole digital innovation originated, and that's how US has become a very dominant and powerful player in this digital economy. And later on, China has adopted it and then improvised it, and China has, because China, you have to remember one thing, right? In China's case, it's not just only pushing US firms or the Western digital companies away and then blocking them and developing their own platforms. That's not the only way China grew to such a level in digital economy or digital businesses, right? They also, there is a historical and economic imperatives are there for China to grow. One is lack of infrastructure in the rural areas, right? So there is no strong banking facilities in rural China, but Chinese are becoming more and more prosperous because of the kind of a manufacturing economy they have built, and the export oriented economy they have built. So the more Chinese are getting into the formal workforce, and they're working in factories and they're becoming entrepreneurs, there is a prosperity in China, right? But to match the prosperity in a similar fashion, with the same pace, right? The other infrastructural facilities are not developed, especially when you talk about the payments and when you talk about the delivery system, public delivery system, or the even business services, right? So one is banking, insurance, and e-commerce, like the goods and supply chain, basically supply chain, and a host of other services, even for that matter, even health, education, e-learning, right? So every nook and corner, you don't have the way Europe or US have developed their infrastructure for over the last centuries, 1 or 2 centuries, or in Europe's case even older. So what China has to do is simply they have to shift this to online. So for that, what they have done is they have funded their own platforms, Chinese government. So that's why we call it state-led model, because it's the funding is much more direct and much more intense, unlike US. It's indirect funding what happened, and it is actually with the universities and research centers, and government institutions. They all came together and then they worked with private enterprises, and they fund them indirectly with projects. Like there is a project and they give the interest-free loans, or they funded the grants, right? So you write a proposal and then you get a grant. But in Chinese case, they have initiated kind of investment vehicles, special purpose investment vehicles, so that they fund in nascent tech forms, platforms, and they copy the same models which are already available by US firms, and then they offer the same services to or products to their users. So this is called leapfrogging, right? So the leapfrog is basically you don't develop your infrastructure incrementally and then get onto the business. That is what happened in other places. It's a incremental and gradual development of digital economy. But in China's case, what happened is it is a leapfrog, right? So you leap from no infrastructure or a very limited infrastructure to just jump to the digital platform. So in between the physical infrastructure, which is available in other places, it is not available. So they have done directly. So with that, they have reaped the benefit. That also we have seen in the last slide, where the last class we have seen that, right? So where the developing economies can reap more benefit than developed economy already with the digital platform businesses are this model, or by having a access to digital technologies and the internet per se. So that is, we have seen that. But on the other hand, if you don't have resources, right, like China has resources, China has a political will, and China has a policy metal, because Chinese government, the state, right? So it has it is very much centrally planned and control and command structure, right? It has, and there are no other parties. There's only one party, and the party and the government both are aligned very well. And you have to see this in a social context also, because China's minority or China's the social divisions are very minimal. So except Tibet and the Xinjiang, which is Uyghurs, who are another minorities who live in the west of China, northwest of the China. So except these two, the Chinese population is relatively more homogeneous, right? So than India or any other, because there are not much social divisions. Because of that, Chinese government, it is also easier for them to push this kind of a policy measures, right? So to have a more digital platforms, and then to pick who can be this, right? So whoever is a entrepreneur who wants to experiment and then try their take entrepreneur risk, and then they can fund them, and then they can give them the resources to succeed. But this cannot happen in every context, right? Let's say in India, how will you do that? If government wants to push, whom it has to push? Though government favors, obviously, because it favors in a different way, right? So there is there is also a criticism of India's both normal economy and the digital economy. India pushes a crony capitalism, right? So there is a criticism, but criticism is one part. But if large scale, digital development India has to resort to, and bring more players, and then more entrepreneurs, the state has to promote, state has to fund them, then state doesn't have a mechanism to do that, right? So state doesn't have such an institutional capacity and the policy frameworks. And similarly, social divisions are very India is hierarchical, right, from a caste perspective. And it is also not horizontally, also it is not very homogeneous. It's religious divisions and the geographical divisions. So there are many divisions. Whom it should fund, if it has to fund, it's not an easy question to answer it. So that's where India took longer time to figure out this whole digital economy than China. So India has taken directly India. That is why in India a lot of American companies could come and they could exploit the market easily, right? So but the thing is, they are not Indian companies. They don't pay, in the earlier stages, they didn't even pay taxes in India, right? So the benefit is Indians can use, could use internet. Via internet, they could use search engines, they could use mail, they could use, all these services they could use. But they were not really in control of the economy, digital economy. The digital economy is controlled from somewhere else. The remote control is in Silicon Valley. So that's how Indian, the digital economy evolved. And with, the more and more people joining these companies, they learned how these business models work and they quit. And then they have raised capital from venture capital. Again, the same model, right? So how the US model works, the venture capital, funding ecosystem, the similar way Indian funding ecosystem also is based on venture capital funding, right? So if you go to Bangalore, you see large number of all the venture capitalists, both Indian venture capitalists, domestic venture capital funds, and similarly the Silicon Valley based or US and UK based, right? So their offices are there across Bangalore, and then they fund all these startups, right? So that's how they've started. So this funding mechanism evolved over a period of time. Like it took longer time, and then India has evolved into a digital economy in a different way. But at the same time, India also took, not only it is a slow pace, but it is also in pockets it developed. It is not really widespread. India didn't it took longer time to go into the tier 2 cities, tier 3 towns, and even so this if you don't have infrastructure, this is one of the ways to reach, to deliver goods, to deliver services. That is one of the, but this inequality, exists across, not just only, between US and others, but the three whom we have seen now, between them, US, China, and Europe have a reasonable, digital economy where the more and more people are served, and the most population has, access to the digital connectivity. And obviously, the connectivity is the first thing, right? The access to connectivity is the first step in, participating in digital economy. Then you participate in digital economy. Then you become a enabler in digital economy. Then you become a producer, like entrepreneur, and then innovator, and you kind of own your own platform, or you start your own business model itself, right? Yeah, new business models you come up with. That's the ultimate level where you reach as an innovator. But in India's case, we have directly adopted the US model, and we are going in the same trajectory. Till now, we didn't have much regulation also. But if you see China's regulation, you would have seen, the news across, everywhere you can see China has cracked down on edutech firms. China has cracked down on fintech firms. China has cracked down on its tech, startups. Jack Ma has disappeared, and Ant Financial IPO is stalled. So these all, news you could see in the last 1 year or 2 years. This is because China has taken a very firm stance on regulation. But in India, on the other hand, India still thinks what China was thinking, a few years ago, like let the digital economy flourish. We can't afford to regulate digital economy if we want to reap the benefits fully, fully, and in its entirety. We need to reap the benefits from the digital economy platforms. So that is where most of the countries don't resort to this kind of regulations. Today we see only EU and China have this kind of a very strong regulations they are going with, right? But in US they are still, there, because in US it's also federal and state versus state, right? So it's a federal federal system. So in the federal system, states have certain powers, and then states have their own, means and rights to create and enforce regulations. So in the US, what happened is California has started its own regulation. It has developed very similar to GDPR. They have also started a data protection law for Californian state. So now, EU and US, they both are in talks, right? So what kind of a global governance, or at least, US, EU should have a common, regulatory framework, at least a similar ones, and they also should have a governance mechanism how to deal with the data economy. So this is, this at the heart of it is data economy, right? So the both are now in talks, and they may come together and kind of harmonize their both regulations and the policies. So if they do that, then China is going to have a different kind of a market, and they both come together and they become a very similar and more closely linked markets and the policy environment, right? They work in more closely related policy environment. But now, if they both work in policy similar policy environment and more intertwined economy, what will happen to the other countries? Because already they have gained certain, not only power, they also have resources, the required resources to push for further economic development in digital space, right? So they have platforms, they have now research centers, they have universities, they have government funding mechanisms. So all this, they have talent. The most important thing is talent, right? So the people who can basically create these technologies, who can work on these technologies, who can basically become innovators from universities, from their own research institute. So they all can create such an ecosystem for their economies. But what will happen to others, rest of the world? So especially when we say global south, you guys know these terms, right? So in policy world, outside, say in general, we use these terms global north and global south. When we say global north, basically the developed world, that's how we used to refer them earlier, but now we refer them as a global north, like North America, especially the European Union, and especially Western and Central Europe, and Japan, to an extent Japan. These countries are usually referred as global north. Global south is basically Latin America, Africa, South Asia, and Middle East, and sometimes it's called developing Asia also, which is like Southeast Asia, and all this clubbed together we call them as a global south, right? So now the global south, one is they don't have connectivity. You can see here, right? So the connectivity, it's basically the connectivity chart, right? So what kind of connectivity we have? Just a second now. So surveillance capitalism, correct? Okay. I'm sorry. So I didn't see the message. Now only I'm seeing the messages. So the access to digital connectivity is a first step. That's what we said, right? So if you see, there's a huge gaps, right? So when you see the Europe or US or North America, so they have a almost there's 70-80%, sometimes 90%. In some of the countries it's 100% actually, right? The smartphone usage or internet usage, broadband usage. But in India, we have still 30 to 40%, people don't have connectivity, digital connectivity. Similarly, in Africa, there's the same, so 45% people don't have connectivity. So the large chunk of, the unconnected population come from these two regions. One is Africa, and second is South Asia. South Asia, when I say India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Nepal, and everywhere. But Sri Lanka has a little better, but it's a small country. It's negligible in the overall, scheme of things, right? But in India, we have like only 60% now. Maybe it was 50% in 2019 and 20, like 51, 52. Now it could have reached 60 maximum, it's like 60%. So now the large population don't have connectivity, and our university systems and our innovation ecosystem, our research spending, so all this, we have a problem with funding, we have a problem with talent development, we have a problem with policy. Because when you have all this, when you are historically you are prosperous, you already have certain systems you evolve, right? You establish to basically develop your new innovations, new technologies. But when you were starting, because India started its journey only because we were in different stages. India came into existence as a nation state only in 47. So after that, we slowly adopted, we also tried to figure out what actually should be done with our universities, with our institutes, with our innovation process, our research and development. So all this, right? So we struggled a bit in the beginning, not bit, a lot in the beginning, and then slowly we kind of but still it exists, right? The divide exists because our funding, our resources, our talent, still we are still in a developing stage. So similarly, Africa is in a similar situation. So some countries in Africa are better, like South Africa, and some are like India, like middle income, and some of them are poorer than India. But we need to understand, Africa and India in a different context also, right? So the Africa and India are almost in the same size, when it comes to population. So both are almost, it's like India is 1.3, 1.4 billion, and Africa also is 1.3 billion. So similar kind of populations, if you compare both of them, so they also have similar kind of inequalities, like, within. So in India, we have a 40% don't have connectivity, but at the same time, we also have, large, illiterate population doesn't have literacy, and population don't have access to education, quality education, and our gross enrollment ratio is low. Our R&D spending on GDP per GDP as part of the GDP is again minimal. So these, all this contribute to digital innovation, right? So that's where the divide exists between the global South and North. So South Asia and Africa, if you see, they are in one block where the development is even slower than Latin America and Southeast Asia. They have little better, connectivity and little better, R&D spending and so on. So there also different countries have different levels of connectivity and all that. So another thing is the divide is also content, right? So who produces the content? Which language? So here you can see that it is all self-explanatory, right? So what are the things contributing to this digital connectivity, lack of digital connectivity, right? So affordability, gender, because in some of the societies, you don't allow, the other gender, females to own a phone, right? So because of the freedom restrictions, right? So because of the religious reasons, because of so many, cultural reasons, so you may restrict, the mobile usage, and you don't allow them to use smartphones. So that is prevalent in some societies. Similarly, geographical disparities, which means actually the coverage is not there. Okay, so some of them, the remote areas where you can't have infrastructure, it's very expensive to build infrastructure, so you didn't, because you don't have resources and your priorities are different, so you could not allocate the resources, then you could not provide the connectivity. So, and second is content, right? So the content is very important thing, because content, makes people, uh, it drives people to come onto the platform, right? So it creates interest, and if it is relevant for you, then you go onto the platform and then you read, right? So you, let's say, if Wikipedia doesn't have a great content on India, right? So how will you, what will you do? You don't go so often to Wikipedia and then read and search and everything, right? Similarly, if the search results are not great on Google for your geography, or what your culture, your society, then obviously you will not go there. So, right, so you don't use them much. So this content, right? So content also is one of the biggest divider for, for both of the both the north and south. And language, because everybody is not, English speaker, and the internet is first developed in English and later, in certain languages. And the resources, where the resources are there, the resources are deployed to develop tools in that particular language, right? So now you can see, many platforms have come up with many languages, different languages, but that is only for few platforms. So every platform cannot have, all the languages. So now, if you want to have, all the tools available in the world in your language, so that, it's like people who are not educated in English, but they are just, educated, or they are, they can uh, read or write or use in their own languages, then it will increase, the usage of digital tools can be increased further. So these are some of the issues. And as I said, this is one of the very important measures for digital innovation. One is your research and development spending as part of the GDP, and second is STEM education, right? So you need to have a strong science, social science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and that kind of a education, very strong education, where you have a higher gross enrollment ratios, which is like, if you have higher, then obviously you produce more and more, people who can develop these tools, who can be innovators, right? So, but unfortunately, the countries which are in global south, they have they are unable to do this because of the resource crunch, right? So there are not enough resources to build more universities and to offer, free education. Because if you don't have public education system, obviously free and public, then you can't have everybody coming to the university or higher education. So they have to drop out. If you don't have, free, they have to pay. Then who can't afford, they will just simply drop out. So all this, all these characteristics, or all these ingredients, make digital innovation, much advanced, or in a way it can foster it, right? So digital innovation, it can foster and it can advance both ways. But that is, unfortunately, the divide exists, and it may increase also if we don't work on, the global south don't work on these things. And also, demand for level playing field, right? So because it is not that just only you work on it, but you also need level playing field, because global north is already, it has a jump start because of its historical its own historical reasons. One example I would give you, right? So I want to give you one example how these things play in the political field, right? If you see, every country, the global north, in the global north, especially in European Union and US, and to an extent in even China and Japan. So they have their own development agencies, right? So who are who work, who give aid, financial aid, and at the same time they also work on developmental issues in the global south. So let's say GIZ, right? So it's a kind of government agency of Germany. So Germany's developmental agency, international developmental agency, which cooperates with other countries, and then it gives funds, and it also works with them on policy matters where they can promote development. But now in the digital space, like similarly, you have in France, it's called AFD. AFD is one of those French development agency. Similarly, Switzerland has its own, and Japan has its own. So what they do is they go to Africa and South Asia, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and everywhere, and they say, we will fund your innovation programs, and we will help you develop your AI strategy, national strategy, right? So how you should have an AI national strategy. Now, when you see digital economy and data-driven, data-driven businesses as a competitive advantage, right? So because you are a nation state and you see it as a competitive advantage, what it means? It means your country should have a more digital businesses and should have a better, bigger pie in the digital economy. So that's what you were striving for, right? As a country, as a nation state. How will you go and develop in a other country and work for not your interest but the other's interest? How will that happen? It cannot happen, right? So what they do is they go to most of the African countries, and they advise them how to develop their digital strategy, how to develop their AI strategy, because AI has become a kind of synonymous with the digital economy, right? Because of its powerful applications, right? So application in digital space, so it can create certain kind of economic impact. So now this GIZ goes to all the African countries, and then build a partnership with some of these African countries or Bangladesh or India, and then tell them, if you want to build AI, you need to adopt these policies. Then we will help you with all the drafting and everything. We have our own consultants across the globe. We will fund that consulting program, and then we will like flush out some kind of $1 million or euros, and then the consultants will help you to put a roadmap, right? So what kind of industry you should focus, and what kind of talent development program you should have, what kind of technology programs you should have in universities, what kind of agencies you should create to promote innovation, what kind of funding strategy you should have, where you should get funding, and how you should fund, and which kind of enterprises you should fund, what kind of startup ecosystem you should have. So if everything is defined by German or French or American development agencies, why will they develop a strategy which is exactly going to counter them, and then a competitor for them, and which is better than them? Why will they do it? It is common sense, right? But unfortunately, the world works that way, because you guys should read a little bit about Bretton Woods, right? Bretton Woods institutions. So please try to read these kind of things, and try to make these terms more familiar for yourselves, right? So that what's how this has a link to digital innovation and policy. So the Bretton Woods is basically World Bank, IMF, these institutions, right? So the IMF defines what actually kind of economic strategy a country should have. If you default on your debt, then you if you can't pay your interest on loans what you have taken from World Bank or IMF, then you are a defaulter. Then what you have to do is you have to comply with their policies. So the policies would be, you reduce public spending on education, you increase user fees in hospitals, in healthcare, and the public infrastructure, make it formal and make it digital, and so that the governments can do even demonetization also, to make everything digital. So then they will be happy. Yes, this is a great strategy you have adopted, so we will give more and more loans to you or more funds to you, and we will also give you a strategy how to become a more business friendly, right? So ease of doing business, they will push your ranking a little bit up. So these things can happen in this kind of a institutional setup, right? In the global governance setup, the similar things are happening in digital governance also. So somebody else is setting the policies, somebody else who are already having resources, who are already having technology, who are already having capacity, they are setting policy standards, they are setting regulatory standards, and the others are following, and their companies are coming and taking the data, and they are becoming even bigger. They are also defining the rules actually along with the national governments of those countries, because they don't have capacity, they don't have mechanisms to formulate and implement their own autonomous policies. So that is the biggest problem what we see in the policy world, where national innovation policies are and AI strategies, these strategies are when they are developed, especially in the low income countries. So, and from there we will come to this data protection, but I want to stop here, and then we will take this data protection in a later class, and which is data protection governance regulations, all this we will take in the next class. And I want you guys to ask questions, and if you have any comments or questions, we will take some of them, and then I want to just introduce this concept to you. So either you want to ask first and then I will introduce, or how do you want it? Please comment here in the message box. So please text me. You want me to take the questions now and introduce this concept, or shall I introduce this concept and then we will take the questions? Yeah. So please text here. Otherwise, I will do the way I want. If you guys, we can do the introduction. Okay. So I got one response. Anybody else? Okay. Introduction, then discuss Q&A. Okay. So let's do that. Then, this is a little, away from the nation state, policy environment and the policy formulation, how digital policy is shaping in different digital innovation policies are shaping in different countries and different geographies, basically, and what kind of divide exists and what are the reasons that we have seen. But now, I want to introduce this concept, digital innovation ecosystem, right? So within the nation state, what happens is, one is a national ecosystem, right? So you have one country like India, and you have innovation policy for yourself, and you know how to drive that, or you somehow you devised a policy, and that policy drives some of these innovation activities, right? So basically, see, in the nation state framework, you also have a lot of actors who are participating in innovation activity, right? But they are not participating alone, right? So let's say Flipkart, right? If Flipkart developed its own platform and started, conducting its business in India. But to develop the platform, how it started it, if you see, it needs venture capitalists for funding, right? There's a funding mechanism. So it can get from anywhere, but venture capitalism is the popular funding mechanism today. So it got funding from venture capital firms, like let's say first round funding, second round, like seed round, right? So you have different levels of funding. When you generate an idea, I think we spoke about this. When you generate an idea and then you pitch that idea to an investor, what investor does is investor gives, if he likes the idea, he says, yes, you work on the prototype. So which means actually it's not the real one, but give me layout, it's like a layout on the paper, right? So you show me how it works on paper, a proof of concept, right? So the concept, it should have some proof of functioning. It should have logic, right? So if you just say, it's like I am building a e-commerce platform, and that site will have, all the goods and products I can sell on the platform, and a lot of people can come under. But if you don't have that, a proof of concept, like let's say a prototype, how will you do that? So how you want to attract the customer, why they should come on your platform, and your platform, what kind of layout it has, and is it user friendly? If it is user friendly, how much time it takes for the guy to make the purchasing decision? So what is the customer journey you can show on the platform? All these things, they have to show that, right? And then the underlying technology, the what kind of technology you are going to use. If it crashes, then what happens? If there is a huge load on it, a lot of users have come one Diwali festive season sale, so a lot of people come and then it crashes. So do you have any alternate? So how do you manage it? And what kind of servers, what kind of data center, what kind of cloud mechanism you have, what kind of cloud technology you use? And if you're using Amazon AWS, then he is a competitor. How will you manage it? If you are going for Google, so will you be able to have all? So all these things they will ask, and then they will give you first some money, like $1 million. Then next round, like that. It's like every level. When the entrepreneur reaches the next level, developing the site, and then after developing, he is able to go into the market, and then he got users, and then once he reaches certain number of users, and then it becomes stable, and then doing business and garnered some revenue. So at every stage there is a round of capital, raise of capital, right? They raise funds. So this is called seed round is the first one, and then round 2, round 1, round 2, round 3, round 4. And then there are certain venture capital who wants to exit, right? When they exit, they will say, it's like I have made enough money because the platform has reached, like let's say 1 million users have come to on platform. Now, because of this 1 million, and then you have stabilized, you have got market. So your valuation, the value of the platform now is 100 million. So I have invested in the early stages 1 million. Now it has become 20 million. So the 20 million, I will take it out, and then I will leave your, investment scheme, and then somebody else will come in and buy it. Or, the Flipkart can go into stock exchange, right? So IPO, initial public offer, they can file, and then they get funding from outside, in the sense from the public. So who are the shareholders? Basically, they buy the share on the market, like stock market, and then they fund the business. So that funding will go to the venture capital or a private equity firm or venture capitalist who wants to exit. They will take their money and get out, right? So they make huge money out of it. So this is how this funding ecosystem works in venture capital model, the Silicon Valley model. So now, if you try this, and then who is owning this platform? The guy who worked in Amazon, right? So the Bansals, actually, one of the Bansals worked in Amazon, and then he came, and then he started this platform, basically. So, which means actually he brought the knowledge where he learned, that actually he learned from Amazon. Amazon is another competitor for them now. But earlier it was not a competitor because it was not even started. So he worked, and then he started this, and he copied and emulated, right? So innovation happens in such a setting where the innovator actually learns from different places. So which means he went to IIT, he learned what is technology, and then he went to Amazon. He applied there what he learned, and he learned new things in Amazon, which is basically e-commerce. which is not actually introduced in IIT, but in Amazon. Then he came out, and then with this experience, he started his firm, but he doesn't have money. So he went to venture capitalist, and then he got the venture capital money, and then he invested in his. So to go to market from there, he needed delivery, supply chain. Supply chain, you need supply chain partners who can deliver their products, the products which they sell on their platform to the customer. So for that, you need partners. So if you see this all happens in one kind of a network, but they are different, they are heterogeneous, right? They are not same, they are not into similar business. So one is education institution, which is IIT, and one is competitor who is in the similar business, but it's a very big, huge business, which is a leader. And third, you need supplier, so you are a delivery partner who is not again in the business of e-commerce like retail, and they are actually in a supply chain business or the delivery, even postal business, right? So who can supply, who can deliver the packets basically. So that is one. And you are basically small retailers who basically sell their products on your platform, right? They are partners again, so who are selling partners. And the customers who buy from you. And there are others like payment, right? So without payment gateway, how a customer cannot buy the product. And if you want to buy the product, you need a payment gateway, and you need a payment channel, and you also need merchant fulfilling system, which can be a different one, or the same payment gateway can offer that, like PayPal or Paytm, or even a bank which can offer that. So, and then there is a bank also where you pay with your credit card, but it goes through a different kind of a payment gateway. And then there is a customer fulfilling, right? So which happens somewhere else. So all these activities are driven by different people, right? So it's not one company does it, different people. So what it means is everybody is interconnected, but at the same time they are interdependent also, but heterogeneous. Yet they are heterogeneous in the sense they are not homogeneous actors. And this whole concept of ecosystem, right? So ecosystem means that actually they are somehow related, they are also interdependent, and they derive value by depending and working with each other, connecting with each other. So that is called ecosystem. But that concept is derived from the sociological theory called actor network theory, right? So that is actor network theory is a system, right? What is system? So we need to understand what is system first of all, right? To understand this, system is basically different actors coming together to perform an action, right? That's simple, as simple as that. They have a goal, they have to perform one action, and they come together. They may have a different backgrounds, may have different, everything is different, heterogeneous completely, but they come for one purpose. But there also can be same, very similar persons can come together, but they can, they work for one purpose, and then they achieve it. So the system is basically by design, right? It's not, see, one is natural systems. There are natural systems which are like ecological systems. It's a natural order where you don't do anything, they are existing already, right? In the natural order. There is a social order. It happens with the sociological constructions, right? So because of our interactions with others, and because of our interconnectedness and interdependency, these social systems evolve, right? And there are other systems which are actually designed by design, in the sense we design them, like business spaces, right? We design them, business ecosystems, like urban planning, right? So we plan and we design urban system. In a sense, there is a transportation system. There is also a park and relaxation and leisure system, and there is entertainment system. There is also, you have a system for education system. You have a healthcare system. So all the systems come together to make it urban system, right? So that's how the systems are developed. So now innovation ecosystem is one such system, right? So where actors who may be different or similar, it doesn't matter, They could be heterogeneous or they could be, but mostly heterogeneous because they are from different, segments, different sectors, different, functions they have, and they come together to and they come together as a network in a sense. They are interconnected and interdependent. So that is the theory of actor network. So this is basically proposed, um, ecosystem, right? So innovation ecosystem as a as a as related to the actor network theory is proposed by these guys, Callan, Akrek, and Lato, right? So they are the ones who proposed this. Now this is widely used. I don't think so. There is any place, we don't use this ecosystem in business and policy, right? So these days. So when it comes to innovation, startup, we call immediately this as an ecosystem, right? So that is because there are so many actors, there are so many networks. So all this work with each other. And obviously there is government, right? So we can't wish away government because they are the ones who promote policy, who regulate, who set standards and who regulate the activities of this particular ecosystem. So that's why governments are also part of it. So now different kinds of ecosystems are prevalent today. One is cluster based, like it is one of the oldest industrial policy framework, where you have a very similar kind of industries at one place, where they are there is an integration between forward and backward integration within that, and you basically derive value out of it because the value is multiplied because they all work together and provide value to both customer and the overall system there. Like let's say Tirupur, right? Tirupur is a cluster with textile cluster, where there are a lot of textile and garments manufactured there, and there you find in each of the step of the value chain, you find all actors there, right? From stitching, from making the buttons of the cloth to and making yarn, and then producing the cloth, and then from the cloth and ready-made garment, and then finally even pressing it and packing it and delivering it. So which means actually, and dyeing and coloring, so everything can happen there. And similarly, why all exist at one place? Because they can the proximity gives them cost advantage first. Second, knowledge production, because each one learns from each other, and it is also at the best division of labor, right? So you can actually improve productivity by focusing on one activity at one place, who are actually the skilled in one particular segment. Like somebody is manufacturing buttons, and then they only focus on that, so that they are very efficient in that. So that is how clusters are imagined and policies are made by cluster based. Similarly, IT industry in Bangalore is cluster based, right? But it has another feature, right? So because of the outsourcing process, where the technology you export from India to US or UK or somewhere else. So you develop the technology here and you export it to somewhere else, or you are offering services like BPO. So these clusters are not just only place based, they are also transnational, right? They are not just in one place, they are actually one to one and one to many. So this is not a cluster, but in a sense they are cluster based for domestic purposes, to make the policy, but they are also dependent on a different kind of a business, unlike manufacturing businesses where only export happens once the finished goods is come out of the factory, then you deliver it, ship it, that's it. Your engagement is limited, but in technology field your engagement is continuous, right? So if you are working in a outsourcing firm like TCS or Infosys, you would know how the business transaction happens between different countries, where how you develop the software for somebody else, Are you applications? Are you assist them in maintaining the application? Are you conduct BPO businesses, like the credit card owner is somewhere else, and you basically help them to whatever the complaint they have, or you sell their the products there. So these kind of things is possible from here. That's what is more of a international, that is international. But there is a jurisdictional, right, where it is not cluster but jurisdictional. Because of certain regulations, you cannot just perform this activity outside this national or state. So they are bound by the jurisdictional laws, right? So if you have to offer, then you have to take another license. Like earlier spectrum was like that, right? The telecom circles we had. So the one circle, if you are offering, if you have a license in one circle, only in that circle you can offer your services. You cannot offer in a, but for that you have to again buy license to offer in another circle. So this is basically a jurisdictional kind of a businesses, right? So and then you have a virtual and digital innovation, which are actually, you don't need any clusters these days, right? So you sit somewhere else, but you do all kinds of actors and networks work in digital space, like blockchain, right? So like cryptocurrencies, you don't know actually who developed Bitcoin. Nobody knows. It's like there are some stories, but nobody knows. They are all virtually, they are developed, and you use somewhere else, and you buy somewhere else, and your platforms are developed somewhere else, and you go as a as a buyer or a participant, you or Binance or something, some platform, you go there and then you buy and you sell, you do conduct, you transact. But at the same time, the developers who mine the coins and who develop coins, right? So who develop these blockchains systems, so they're also like in virtual space. You don't need you don't need to be at one place, and you don't need to be an industrial cluster, like a IT cluster, or you don't need to be in one place like a textile manufacturer cluster. So to gain the knowledge, so the knowledge exchange is actually in digital space. And similarly, open innovation ecosystems, this is more interesting because here it is not closed, right? So there are ecosystems which are closed because only in that platform you can do whatever you are doing. You cannot do beyond that. But open innovation is like Wikipedia. Wikipedia is open innovation system, right? So where anybody in the world, it's open source. Anybody in the world can go and then get edit anything. But there are certain guidelines. If you follow the guidelines, you can become an editor and you can produce the content, you can edit the content, you can change the content. So all that you can do. So which means actually you are creating that. You and they also source the tools, basically what kind of tools to be developed to make the Wikipedia as a system better. So they also open source. It's basically sourced from the people. So it's an open innovation. Similarly, this concept is now gaining momentum in normal businesses also, because Wikipedia is a open platform and it is also free platform. It doesn't cost anything. It runs on philanthropic donations, basically, right? So they raise money on platform voluntarily. If somebody pays them, they raise the money, and then with that they cover their operational costs and the business, the transactional cost, whatever the cost they have. So that is how they are conducted. But the businesses also these days, they are also resorting to this open innovation ecosystems, where any actor, they open up the space, right? So especially an application, so with the help of APIs, application interfaces, basically. So right, so they actually come together, and it is crowdsourced, the by inviting people on their platform to give an idea, to develop tools. So all this can happen now on different platforms. Banks are able to do that, and even in pharmaceutical companies this is happening. So this is called open innovation ecosystem. So this is gaining momentum, and we will talk about it when we go into the next classes. In the we'll talk in detail when I talk about commons, and common pool resources, and digital commons, data commons, and commons governance. So all this we will talk in the later classes. Okay, so this is for today. So this is and these are some of the questions I have put to ponder upon for ourselves. So basically, it's like when we discuss all this, then some of the questions these are the questions I got, right? So what and who is holding back the global south, right? So why global south is, so some of the answers we know, but let's think, you think deeper, right? So if you want to give a write up, just write and then send me. So I can give some comments. So these are some of the questions, if you want to answer in a short answers, right? So some 2-3 lines you want to put, and then your mind, you put your mind to this, and then little bit you elaborate and then send me. I'm happy to give some comments. And then where does India stand in global innovation, right? So, and how do we understand various stakeholders and their engagement from power, influence, and interest perspective, right? And what should be done to make global south more equal partner, right? So what do we do? So do we close our digital space, like digital sovereignty, we apply that rule, or do we pour more funds, or we ask more funds from global north and then say, it's like you give us more funds so that we develop our own, and then we ask in less interference in policy. We develop our own policy, don't give us any policy, we know how to develop. So is that the way we should do? So how do we bridge this divide? Or we kind of devise ways to give more connections, right? So more digital connectivity, promote more digital connectivity to our populations. So make it 100%, 90%, 100% digital connectivity, and with a high quality internet. So, and build local data centers where the data can be produced, data can be stored and kept. So what are the best ways to do it? So all these questions we keep thinking, and then get some answers, or sometimes we may not get answers. So yeah, so if you have any questions, let's take the questions and then we will call it a day. Yes, you can email me, and this is my email ID. So I will just write it here. Okay, so that you have, I think you have, but still I am writing. So this is my mail ID. So you can write to me, and if you want to write something on these questions, you are welcome to do that. I am happy to give some comments. So actually, there's one announcement I want to make before you ask any questions. Last announcement. So next class, we will deal with the Indian innovation policy, right? So India has come up with STI, Science, Technology, and Innovation Policy. So I will send the document to you guys. Read it. Then probably you make if you think if you have time and if you think it's a good idea, then you make one slide. So how this policy what kind of actors and network are there based on that policy, right? So once you read that, who are these, how they are interdependent, how they are interconnected, and what is good, what do you think is good about this policy, what is bad about this policy, what do you think? Well, this is an exercise, right? So because this is how you learn how to make the policy, how to analyze the policy, right? So, and how to critique the policy, because that's also very important, critiquing the policy, criticizing the policy, but critiquing based on logic, based on evidence, based on certain parameter, right? So not that because I don't like the party, so I hate this policy. No, it's not that way, right? It doesn't work that way. So let's do this exercise, and I will send that. Probably we will put up on the post on the Digital Nalanda also, the platform, the Indian STI policy it is called. So please remember, it's a STI policy. I may have the document. Yeah, I'll do it later. Yeah, so I will send you guys later. So so please go through that and then come up with these questions, right? What is good, what is bad about policy, what you understand. First, you lay out what you understand, right? So a kind of an overview. What is it about? A small paragraph, some three lines, 2 lines, 3 lines. Then you come up with the who are the actors they're talking about. So when they say STI, and what kind of ecosystem is that? Because there are a lot of mentioning about ecosystem, right? So ecosystem. There are some 16 times they have mentioned ecosystem, if I am not wrong. And they have also mentioned innovation. They have also mentioned actors. They have also mentioned about, universities. They have mentioned a lot of things. They have mentioned, they have mentioned even, gender, caste. They have mentioned religion, and they have mentioned, a lot of things. But what is good about it? Then, once you do that, the actor network theory, what we understood now, the ecosystem, who are the actors, what is the ecosystem looks like, right? So what they mean by that. So you lay out that. So in your own words, you don't have to, do some great research or something like that, in-depth research. In your own words, come up with this, and then make 2 or 3 good, what is bad, in the sense what will work as far as what you learned or what you have understood from these classes. What is good about it, what is bad about it. Yeah, these things you come up with that, and then we will discuss about that exercise. Once you submit, then we will discuss about this exercise in the next class, or the fifth one. This is third one, right? The fourth session we will do it if you submit before, or we can do it on fifth session, but I would like to do it on fourth session. And if you have any questions, please ask me now. We are already half an hour we are behind. Yeah, please ask if you have any questions. Oh, okay. Sorry, I have sent only to digital Nalanda, looks like. Okay, everyone. Yeah, now you get it. Okay. And every Thursday we are conducting an interactive session. So if you guys want to join, so we can discuss about your career plans, if you want to discuss, or if you want to discuss any particular issues. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. I was unable to unmute. That's why.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. It was a nice lecture. So also in the first class also, I raised this query, especially with regards to public goods. So do you think that the problems faced by Indian technology innovation sector can be resolved to an extent by creating public infrastructure and public goods? When I meant public infrastructure, I know you are very much familiar with UPI and all. So what UPI did to our country is very much kind of it's an immense growth. It's given us an immense growth in that sense. So wouldn't it be a good idea to focus on public digital infrastructure and goods in via that?
Of course, it is good. See, the thing is this, right? So when you have a large population, you have to create feasible solutions which are affordable, right? So the most affordable solutions are the ones which are free, basically. And the transaction costs are low, and the technology can be developed and deployed very easily, one, and user friendly, and at the same time affordable. So these are the 3 basic principles, right? So to deploy any technology. So the public infrastructure, when you say digital infrastructure, so the public infrastructure is always good because it is cheaper to use, and everybody can use. There won't be any dominance by any platform, so that it's like the government has more control over it rather than public. But the fallout is, if the government is not responsible, if the government is not respecting your rights, then there is a problem. If the government captures data and then resort to some kind of malicious intentions, then there's a problem. As long as government has good intentions, and as long as government facilitates any public infrastructure, but it has to also enable everybody. It is not just creating public infrastructure. Digital infrastructure is not alone, is not going to help, right? So UPI is good, but what about people who are not digitally literate? How can they use payment transactions online or with mobile without certain skills. Like basic skills are required, right? So government has a responsibility to enable it. One. Second, government also has any responsibility to provide devices at an affordable rate. So because affordability is the biggest challenge for digital connectivity, right? So to get to get the best out of it, best benefits of digital connectivity only comes when it is affordable, right? When it's affordable, when you can use it user friendly, and when you have skills to do it, and when it is trustworthy, right? That's another very important point, right? So it should not, the platforms, UPI is one thing, but UPI is used by different platforms, right? So UPI is just an interface, but the others, they have to use it responsibly, in the sense they have to conduct business with the users, their consumers, responsibly, so that the trust is restored, right? When there is no trust between the actors, so especially your data is gone, right? Your data is lost, or your transactions are lost, and then you don't know how to retrieve, or your money is gone but you don't know how to trace it, or you have a problem with your personal data is misused on the platform. So there are other adjacent issues, right? It's not just only the UPI. There are adjacent issues which are may not be exactly UPI related, but UPI per se is good. But what about these other issues, right? So when you focus on all these things, then it's good, having public info. Similarly, digital health mission, right? So the mission is very good. On paper, it's great, and if it is also implemented, it is good. But the thing is, do you have necessary skills, necessary connectivity, necessary high quality internet data, high quality data? And similarly, this data is used by these parties who are, especially the enterprises which are capturing them. So are they going to use them responsibly, anonymizing them, not revealing or data breaches, not resorting to data breaches or unintended purposes? So are they doing it? So these things are very important when you devise your public policy strategy, right? Or digital policy strategy, or public infrastructures you are building. So these are very important things. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you for participating, and thank you for discussing. Actually, it's a interactive session as well today. So let's meet again. So if you guys are if you want, we can meet on same time, but on Thursday, right? So for interactive session, where if you have any doubts other than just only the content, but we can discuss this also. But otherwise, we can. And the next and obviously the Saturdays are the normal, we will go with the presentations and the content what we intend to do, right? So in general, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. So you guys have a nice weekend. So bye bye. Yeah.